Don't mention it to her. I think she's going through, the M word. Her moods are all over the place, often erratic and unpredictable, very angry at times over nothing. She always complains about her partner. Why doesn't she just leave him? Although, who would want her? She has put on weight and passed her use-by date. You've probably guessed it. I'm talking about the taboo subject, menopause. Similar to the view on menstruation, society doesn't like to talk about it. A subject men don't understand and a one where women feel unable to talk about. This is part 2 of a 2-part series on empowering women naturally through menopause. In this episode of Me and My Health Up, we'll be exploring menopause and helping you or a loved one navigate through it in the best possible way. I'm your host, Anthony Harcher, a clinical nutritionist and lifestyle medicine specialist. The purpose of this podcast is to enhance and enlighten your well-being. And today we'll be chatting with naturopath and natural menopause expert, Brenda Rogers, on this big M menopause subject. Brenda Rogers is a natural medicine expert specializing in menopause. She's passionate about working with the new generation of women who are creating empowering new paradigm for what midlife looks like. Women as a powerful ambassador for the wisdom of the middle age. Brenda is a clinical naturopath, certified life coach, certified clinical aromatherapist, yoga, meditation and spiritual teacher. Brenda helps women who want to transition gracefully through menopause and into the best years of their life to become a steady, calm woman who doesn't get riled by anything and celebrates all of who she is. So welcome, Brenda. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thank you, Anthony. Yeah. Thank you for that introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. And part 1 was such a hit. So for those that haven't listened to part 1, please listen to episode 52. And Brenda shares all her wisdom on perimenopause. So today we're talking about menopause. And I got such great feedback on the previous episode. And women want to know more about this subject. And Brenda's here to educate us all, even us men, as well as the women that go through this, on how we can best help our partners or how women can best navigate through menopause naturally. So to start things off, Brenda, what's the difference between postmenopause and perimenopause?
Well, I'm glad you asked. A lot, actually. A lot. And we could probably speak for 50 hours on this topic, Anthony. But in essence, primarily what the difference is that in perimenopause, a woman still has her period. So it might be erratic, it might be all over the place, it might be quite light, but she's still menstruating. And 12 months after the last period, and you never really know when your last one's going to be, but 12 months since you had a period is considered to be menopause. That's when you've hit menopause. And from then on, you're pretty much in postmenopause right up till the day you die, basically. So now your estrogen is so low that it's not supporting a release of an egg or that whole cycling process. And so the symptoms change. Plus, you're probably by this time around early 50 and have gone through the big 50 celebration and, maybe, got a few wrinkles, a few more wrinkles or, and we're, confronting aging a lot at this point. And so there's quite a lot of difference between, a low progesterone state, which is the early menopause, early perimenopause, and then that sort of no progesterone anymore, or, minimal and very low estrogen. There's still some. It's coming from the, adrenals. The adrenals are still producing some estrogen, but in that much lower state. And what we know is that other hormones are now driving us. So there's two hormones you're probably aware of, Anthony, that regulate a woman's cycle, FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone. And these are very high in the middle of a woman's cycle, and that's the best time of the month for us. That's at ovulation. It's like the full moon, midday, summer. That's the energy of ovulation, and that's when our FSH and LH peaks. And so you can feel really good like that all the time in postmenopause, but we usually don't. We're usually struggling with getting used to being a woman who's no longer cycling, who's being driven by these different hormones. Because estrogen and progesterone have their own personalities. They drive a certain personality, and even personality is not the right word, Anthony. It's more like behaviour and the way that we think. Estrogen and progesterone are designed to encourage, facilitate, ensure the reproduction of the species and taking care of children and having children, taking care of children, and hence lots of things associated with that, like the libido is higher. We're moister. We are more concerned about others. We are really sort of more compliant in a way in order to facilitate the family unit being protected and growing. Growing young children until they're able to fend for themselves. So that all shifts and changes in your 50s. That reproductive responsibility is no longer there. And that drive to take care of others is much, much less. And so this sense comes through of, it's my turn. It's my turn. But often it's like, well, now what do I do? I've been, even if you haven't had children, you've been in that state for 30 years. What is it? Yeah, 35 years maybe. And so there's this questioning, who am I? What's my life about now that I'm it's my time. And so it can be quite unsettling and quite disconcerting these years. And I think it's really great to have some really good role models. And, that often is missing for a lot of people. The education is certainly missing. So that's the beginning of the differences, Anthony. Let me start there.
You mentioned role models, and I was just wondering if you could elaborate further on these role models that are important to help people through this stage that, as you described, there's some identity, I don't like the word crisis, but there's some loss of identity, as you mentioned, is probably a better word. So how can they get this role model support to help them navigate through this identity change or transition?
Yeah, you're definitely spot on. It is an identity crisis for a lot of women, and some people smoothly sail through it. And I think it depends a lot on how on track you are with your life. If you're kind of all in an unhappy job and in an unhappy relationship, don't like yourself very much, you're feeling overweight and sluggish, then course correction needs to occur. And that is kind of what is you're being kind of pushed there, really, in a way. But in sort of ancient women's mysteries and feminist spirituality and those kinds of things, we know menopause to be a rite of passage. And a rite of passage is a time of identity change. And so there's this slow process of or disassociating from the reproductive woman, going through this kind of confused, what's called a liminal state, and then finding your new tribe. That's kind of what happens, and associating now with being an older woman. And so to answer your question about role models, there are role models out there. They're often celebrities. They're the ones that we hear about, celebrities or people who are famous for one reason or another. What is not great about that is that, if you're looking at the Hollywood woman, the 50-year-old and 60-year-old, they're often struggling with the industry requirement to be as youthful as possible, and so they aren't always a realistic role model for us. Even saying that, though, those women can be very inspirational. If they still haven't done too much to their face and they kind of might look a bit sad, that's not a great role model for us. But to find other role models, people will often find those potentially within their own families and friendship circles, an aunt or a mother or a grandmother who did it well, who flourished in those wilder wisdom years. And then over and above that is really going into the realm of that sort of feminist spirituality again. And I know this is a health talk and we probably should be talking about nutrition, Anthony, or herbs or something. But let me just say that in our current culture, spiritual culture, I grew up in a Christian culture, which is the Western society. So did you. And so the archetypes or the role models in that philosophy, if you like, are ones that we absorb and identify with or not identify with. And there's an absence of older women archetypes in male-oriented spiritual philosophies. I hope that makes sense. In Greek mythology, they kind of took over a lot of the previous cultural mythologies where women were not idolized, but they were powerful women, were really recognized. Whereas in the Greek mythology, a lot of them disappeared. The older woman ones disappeared, or they became hags or nasty women. And the ones that were, honoured and appreciated were the ones that were like the consorts to the men and the beautiful young ones, the Aphrodites, and the powerful, strong ones, the Athenas. So to really find role models, we're actually at a stage in our history where we're actually having to revisit mythologies Roman Greek mythologies and rediscover those and find those again. And the importance of that really is that it helps you find something that you can relate to, and it gives you permission to expand your repertoire. You're not just kind of depressed 55-year-old or made up plastic surgery kind of. I'm nothing wrong with plastic surgery. I mean, if women choose to do that, I think that's their prerogative. But it's that getting comfortable with aging that we really want, and then stepping into this powerful time in our 50s where we've got more fire in our belly, we've got years of experience, and I think we mentioned this last time, this phase, this 50s and 60s phase, is an opportunity for a woman to become a leader if that's what she wants, to lead, to be, to grow up, to be a leader, to however that looks for her. And so, I think the absence of really positive role models is a reason why the statistics for women at this age aren't that great. Women are at high risk of mood and mental disorders, and they're often, especially if they separate from a partner, they're often at high risk of financial problems as well. So, and that affects their health and well-being. So, it's important to have the conversation where women are aware of that as well, because there is a tendency to want to escape. If you're at that transition phase, there is a strong desire to escape that is very normal for that menopausal woman. But sometimes you're jumping out of the fire and into out of the frying pan and into the fire. And so, I kind of feel obliged to warn women that just escaping isn't always the answer, that working with the job that you're in or the relationship that you're in or working with your health and well-being to work through the steps to finding what it is that you really want tends to be way more empowering at the end, way more helpful.
I agree totally. It's, we need to reflect and look inwards for the answers as opposed to think, they're external and, the best solution is changing jobs, changing partners. And often we can take the old self into a new job, a new partner, and the same problems arise because there's no change in self and we haven't done that inward work or that self-reflection. And it leads me to the question that, the point you made is a really good point, and it's something that our society, our Western society, really struggles with because we glorify young and beauty, and we don't see elderly or aging with the same limelight as we do with the young and the beautiful. And whereas you look at some other cultures, such as the Japanese culture, when you get older, you got more respect from the people around you because of your wisdom and what you can, pass on in terms of knowledge. And so, in these other cultures, the elderly or the aged are really looked up to. But in our culture, it's not the same. And I think it's probably part of the, this, I guess, conundrum the women go through is that I'm going through this phase that I'm not going to be accepted for, as an aged woman, because I'm not young and beautiful anymore. And so if you got any tips in helping what people can do on a, whether it be on a daily basis or where they could go for some resources or, who they talk to in terms of helping shift their mind around this self-acceptance of who they are, their aging, getting akin to their new identity. And as you said, it's, this rite of passage. It's, embracing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, they can come and see me. I think, though, that, this age comes with a lot of fire in it. It's a fiery autumn stage of life. Think about all that vibrant colour. As the leaves are fading, they have this burst of vibrant colour, and that comes through in those years as well. And it's allowing that to kind of guide you. I actually think sometimes that the hot flushes are some of that fire coming through, not being fully allowed to be expressed. And that will, that I think, owning that and being okay with that is really important. It is a wilder time of life. There's a rawness and a wildness to your 50s that is very different to 20s, 30s, and 40s. Very different, because estrogen is the hormone of compliance. And so that's no longer running the show. If a woman wants to, just to specifically answer your question though, Anthony, there's small pockets of this information, and my mission is to bring women's awareness to this. And so hence doing this education with you and running programs, and I'm doing a shameless plug here. I'm doing a retreat at the end of the year to bring the wellness and this personal journey process together, so that women can find who they are. But it's not an easy thing. I don't think there's an easy answer to your question.
Yeah, I didn't think there would be, and certainly it's very much for the individual, right? It needs to be individualized. It's not a generic approach. Here's a pill, it will solve your identity crisis. It's more of understanding that's personal. That person's values, beliefs, the direction they want to take their life, and really coming up with a plan. And I'm sure that's what your retreat does in terms of helping women on their own path, because not every woman wants to walk the same path.
No, and I do think that health can guide you. So, from me, and you would know this as well, Anthony, you can see patterns by the symptoms that are occurring for that woman. And if they're not sleeping at 3 a.m., waking up, if they're having night sweats, if there's weight gain around the middle, there's a whole stack of symptoms that will tell us, the adrenals are unhappy, or the liver's not happy, or the blood sugars are all over the place. And so these symptoms can help lead you back. They can be the catalyst for the course correction and the portal into the next steps into who you want to be. So, you start working on your adrenal health because it's the adrenals that, like I mentioned, it's the adrenals that take over, or not even take over. It's like now only the adrenals are responsible for estrogen production. So if you've been stressed to the hilt for 10 years, your adrenals are not going to be happy. So you start working on adrenal health, and that'll mean, maybe taking a bit of time out, some weekends for yourself, maybe doing a little bit more yoga, pulling back your exercise so you're not over-exercising anymore, because that can be destructive. Eating a nice adrenal happy diet, which is mineral rich, especially sodium, and saturated fats, really important for this time, even though we've been indoctrinated against saturated fats for a long time. This is the time really to have good quality saturated fats with good quality cholesterol coming in. And that's a whole conversation.
What are those good quality? Sorry, Brenda. What are those good quality saturated fats?
My favourite is butter and ghee. Other ones would be, I'm a big fan of broths, and so at the moment I've just boiled up a ham hock for some pea soup. And there's a little bit of fat that comes when you cook that bone, and I always keep that. Marrow is amazing. So cooking marrow bones and using the marrow in recipes. Grass-fed animal fats are really, really fabulous. So, cooking your meat in tallow or lard, ideally pasture-raised or grass-fed animal fats. And I know that's kind of old-fashioned. We've been really indoctrinated against those for a long, long time. But if you go back to traditional diets, wise traditional diets, ancestral nutrition, then those are the fats that are really important for adrenal health and many, many other things. And in small amounts, balanced out with all the other cofactors, they aren't atherosclerotic producing or produce heart disease, then avoiding those fats can be detrimental. They're important for good skin. There's dry skin is really common for women. So good fats. I mean, you can have your nut butters and your avocados and your olive oils and those kinds of things. I encourage those as well. But your good quality saturated fats really add something else. And if people are leaning more towards vegetarian, then coconut oil is good for some of it. But I highly encourage the butters and also things like for eggs, fish eggs, chicken eggs, and those kinds of things as well.
And what do you suggest to those women that may have that concern around cholesterol because they've had a recent health checkup? Cholesterol may be in the high end, and they've been told to cut fats, but they're at this age. So, do you have any advice there around what's the best course of action?
Well, you've got to understand the cholesterol myth and how we've been misinformed for a long time about what elevates cholesterol. And in my experience and all the research I've been doing, particularly recently, but for 20 years, fats are not the culprit for heart disease that we think they are. And in fact, refined carbohydrates and refined or processed vegetable oils and sugar are your culprits. And so bringing yourself back to a traditional diet, what grandmother or your great-grandmother ate, off the land, local, grass-fed, organic, not with 500 ingredients on the label. These are the foods that regulate normal cholesterol levels. And also, the other thing is stress. We know that cholesterol is the raw material for stress hormones. And so there's, a theory that cholesterol can elevate when you're stressed because it needs more cortisol. It needs more of those steroidal hormones, thyroid hormones, and reproductive hormones. That blows people's minds. Unfortunately, our institutionalized nutrition message is still low fat, and that has been debunked now for at least 10 years and longer. We have known that to be inaccurate. It does sell a lot.
Yeah, so you recommend.
Oh, sorry, I cut you off, Anthony. Go ahead.
No, you're right. So, what I took away there, in order to, get the liver functioning better, so to manage their stress better, so that by managing your stress better, you're going to help liver function, and the liver is going to better work with the fats. As opposed to, a poor functioning liver is obviously not going to support the right balance of our blood lipids and what we need. And as you said, it's going to focus more and be more dominant around the stress hormones as opposed to a nice balance of the hormones that we need, and a good balance of fats within our system. The other question I had was just around weight gain. So, some women, well, not some women, I think a lot of women have always had this body image consciousness, right, because of the way society is. Not that I, agree that it should be that way. But so, they've had this ever since they were a teenager. They're now in their 50s. And for the first time, they may start seeing weight gain. And I just remembered, you just mentioned that one of the best things that can serve them during this time is not strenuous activity. And back in the heyday, back in their 20s and 30s, they would have seen strenuous activity as the answer to help get that weight gain off. What's your how do you approach weight gain and helping women to shed those unwanted kilos in this latter part of their life if they really need to be looking after themselves and doing less strenuous activities and eating more fat? And so I just wanted to get your view on this weight gain, because I know it'd be on the listener's mind as to, well, I've got this weight. What do I do? How can I get rid of it?
Yeah, and there's quite a lot of elements to the answer to your question, Anthony. It depends on whether the person was healthy leading into their 40s and it's healthy weight gain. So a couple of kilos extra healthy weight is encouraged because our fat produces hormones. And a little bit of extra estrogen produced by the weight, the fat in your body is a beneficial thing. So there's that aspect. Then there's, if you're healthy and you're leading into menopause and you've stopped cycling, so you're not the whole reproductive cycle isn't occurring anymore, then the metabolism drops slightly. So there needs to be a healthy reduction in food intake, not nutrients. I'm assuming that person's already eating a nutritious diet with good healthy fats, good proteins, and their blood sugars are in balance. And then they've got to 50 and then they've started to put on a little bit of weight. And, 1 or 2 or 3 kilos over a period of 1 or 2 years is absolutely fine. If it's beyond that, then couple of things. That person may be eating the same as they were in their 40s, and you can't do that. You have to eat a little bit less to stay the same weight. And what helps is for a woman to be in touch with her body so that she's listening to her appetite and not eating when she's not hungry, or eating just smaller portions. So just gentle, subtle ways to eat a little bit less that don't feel like a radical diet. That's the healthy approach. Then there's the unhealthy woman who has not managed her stress, who is eating the wrong things, who has diseases or conditions. And with those women, we've got to correct the condition first. So typical things are unregulated stress, unregulated blood sugars, and unregulated inflammation, all of which produce weight around the middle or excess weight all over the body as well. But focusing on the weight without focusing on the health is the wrong priority. It's in the wrong order. And so those women need to find a way to start to treat themselves better, to start to eat better, to manage their stress, to find some time for themselves, to look at their life to see if they're actually happy, to bring in some time for some self-reflection as they go through this transition time. And a lot of the stuff that hasn't been dealt with in the past comes back to be handled. That's stressful. So there's just so many sources of stress at this time. Then on top of that, the woman may be caring for parents, caring for teenagers, caring for partners, caring for a boss. And so if they're over-caring, if they're not taking any time for themselves, if they don't have great boundaries or a process for spending some time on themselves, then they've got to work with a coach. They've got to work with somebody like you, Anthony, or somebody like me who is, wellness trained, but also able to help that person work through the blocks to being well. And so blood sugars, huge contributor to overeating and the carbohydrate craving and addiction that occurs to overeating. So that has to be handled. And then there's the inflammatory inflammation that usually occurs from stress combined with too much processed food in the diet. And that includes your processed oil. So we know vegetable oils like soy oil, cottonseed oil, safflower, sunflower, all those vegetable oils are highly inflammatory in the body. And then you've got the body trying to handle that, producing cholesterol as a solution to the inflammation. So there's another story around high cholesterol, right? I mean, it comes from, let me just take a second to explain something. Naturopaths and nutritionists and people who are listening to the body understand that the body's always trying to heal itself. It's trying to protect itself. It's trying to do the right thing always, always, always. And so you have to understand why it's elevating cholesterol. There's a reason. Why can't you sleep at 3 a.m.? There's a reason. So it's getting curious about that and allowing that to be the guide to the healing and to what opens up when a person is healed. So inflammation, blood sugars, and stress.
And in terms of the exercise that best supports them at this age, in terms of happiness, at best fitting in with where their body's at and what their body most needs, is there any particular exercise that you recommend?
Yeah, well, the research around cardiovascular exercise or cardio exercise is that it's kind of okay for about 20 minutes, and then it seems to elevate cortisol levels, and you don't want that. So if you are doing cycling on spin classes or running, and you're not healthy from it, and you're struggling or suffering, because some women can do that and they're okay, the more active women, then you need to shorten it back to maximum of 20 minutes and balance it out with some gentle yoga. I know some women are so driven to lose the weight that slowing down the exercise can be difficult, and I understand that. It just takes a little bit of time, and you've got to retrain your mind that it's okay to do an hour exercise where you don't come out of it fully sweaty. That's actually going to help with weight loss, believe it or not. So to answer your question, it's really just keeping that high intensity stuff to shorter stages, and bringing in some of the gentler exercise, going for walks, yoga, bushwalking, dancing, more fun ones. The more fun it is, the more they elevate the stress hormones reduce as well. So gardening and active engagements that don't necessarily involve flogging yourself.
And you mentioned earlier, in terms of that sort of more wildness comes out because the estrogen, the hormone of compliance, is not as dominant anymore. So are women more adventurous, in their 50s and 60s? Like, do they want to, bungee jump and skydive? And, so do you recommend they actually go and explore more, to help them in this period of this transition?
Gosh, yeah, you're very insightful, Anthony. There's definitely a craving for adventure, And that desire to travel is often strong, to discover themselves, though. It's an internal adventure. So if a woman feels like skydiving is going to help her find herself, then she might want to do that. But you've also got this sort of tempering with maturity and more anxiety. There's often an anxiety very prominent at that age until you've really found your way. So, it can be a little bit of, yes, I want more adventure, but I'm kind of more unsettled and afraid at the moment, so I'm not sure. But so it might not be skydiving or cliff. What's the one where they jump off cliffs? Cliff hanging or whatever it is. Cliff diving, I think. Yeah. Or it may not be that. But certainly exploring new things, being adventurous with new things, whether they're adrenaline rushes or not. I actually probably think that those adrenaline rushes aren't so I'm not – I mean, I used to go canyoning and that kind of thing, and it was a huge adrenaline rush, and I don't want to do that anymore. But I do want to oh, gosh, if only we could travel, right? I do want to explore. I want to go and meditate in India. I want to go and maybe try ayahuasca in South America or I want to go. A lot of women want to go and study. They want to go back to the study that they never did and discover what their vocation is, and that can be very exciting. So, yeah.
And in terms of, you mentioned the anxiety when I was talking about these wild things, and the name came to me just then. It was the base jumping, jumping off cliffs with a parachute. So certainly, women are more exploratory, and it ties in well with what you said in the previous episode, which was, the perimenopause is that second teenage era, or that's sort of like their menstruation cycle is that, it's irregular, like the and I guess and as a result of that irregularness, same as the moods are sort of up and down during the perimenopause, and you're going through that teenage sort of phase again. So with this change in hormones and, low estrogen, or low but not as high estrogen, the anxieties, can be up at times, and, you mentioned depression and rates of suicide, I think you said, was the highest at this age group for women. What do you suggest around mental health? Like, how can women best support their mental health?
Anxiety can be blood sugar mismanagement. Anxiety can be high cortisol, and anxiety can be adrenal fatigue. Anxiety can be a nervous system that's shot. It can be too much coffee. It can be too much sugar. It can be just a lot going on and overwhelmed with too much responsibility. So it's getting curious about what's the cause, because anxiety is not our natural state. And so it's even if you've been anxious all your life, it's still something you can learn to come to peace with. It might mean learning to meditate. It might mean taking some herbs that nourish the nervous system. All those things are really important for, to be curious about with that individual, because I don't believe in putting Band-Aids over things. I don't believe in putting a Band-Aid over the oil light on your dashboard doesn't solve the problem, right? And so we've got to be intelligent about symptoms being there for our learning, our wisdom, and to use that as the guide for what has to be done. And that's a different perspective on health than what we get in our medical world.
And on that note, how can listeners best connect with you if they'd want, further support around their journey through perimenopause, menopause?
Yeah, fantastic. Well, you can find me on Facebook. I think you're going to put some links in Anthony. Brenda Rogers, I'm in there. I've got the Menopause Lounge. That's also in Facebook. And I have a beautiful little sort of health check that I offer complimentary for people. It's on my website, or qwomen.com.au/health check, I think it is. And people can get a nice summary of the typical things that occur at that age and see where they're at with that. Or email me. Email me and we can have a chat. I do offer complimentary 30-minute chats to discuss your particular circumstances, or go and see you, and then you can refer them to me as well.
Absolutely. So I have all Brenda's details, so you can certainly be in touch with me and I can pass on Brenda's details. I'll also have them all posted in the show notes, everything that Brenda mentioned. And thank you, listeners, and thank you, Brenda, for sharing such great insight into this really not well known and talked about subject. So I really appreciate you putting aside your time and your busy practice to educate the public around menopause and how they can best help themselves navigate through this, beautiful transition in life to some new wild times. So I'll leave it there. So listeners, if you've liked the episode, please share it with others that can also benefit with hearing Brenda's wisdom on menopause. Please like and share it, and stay tuned for more insightful episodes of Me and My Health Up.